Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and last year I made a video explaining what the heck my third channel is all about. It's called CP, and the series on it is called Conniving Puffin. It's an epic story with crazy twists and a wickedly confusing family tree, etc, etc. Basically, if you like my channel, you should be consumed by the story. It's like the story equivalent of my theory channel. In the last video, I summarized the plot of seasons 1 through 5, and in this video, I'm doing seasons 6 through 10. So go back and watch that one first, so you'll already know everything up until this point. Warning. That video goes pretty fast, so pay attention. It's probably easier just to watch the series, specifically the chronological playlist I will link below, but some people are lazy, so here's part 2. Back in the 0th dimension, we find everyone being burnt with blue fire, tortured painfully, endlessly by a mysterious woman of an unknown identity. She laughs maniacally and screams at them. Meanwhile, Mozart has run from the exploding core mansion, and he tells himself there's no way Mandy could have survived the explosion. But lo and behold, she comes flying out of the wreckage with a freaking jetpack. Mozart runs for dear life, and she crashes next to him. He finds that it was a decoy. He then hears behind him the real Mandy landing and running away. She turns around and pulls a gun on him. She fires it, he dodges it, and it ricochets off of the jetpack back into her face. Mozart sighs of relief and goes back to Marina's house to relax, but something isn't right. He sees an image is slightly altered on the wall, and he realizes that he is currently trapped in the fourth wall somehow. He shoots himself and he floats up through the pond next to Antoinette's wreckage. He is stunned as to how this happened. Then Mozart tilts his head and sees his mother fiddling with the settings on the pond nearby. She has no idea he's escaped. Mozart looks at the ground and sees Mandy's gun. He knows exactly what it is. It is a special gun, one that can disable her alchemy. Mozart then goes to explain how there are different levels of alchemy. There's a non-alchemist, a beginner, an intermediate, an expert, a professional, and a god. Mandy's a professional, and her gun has the capability to disable her momentarily. Mozart sneaks up from behind her. She's still muttering to herself about wanting the singularity fragment or whatever. Mozart aims the gun on her and fires, knocking her out. He brings her back to Marina's house and ties her to the couch. Time for interrogation. He asks how she escaped the explosion. Mandy tells him that she warped out at the very last second. Mozart asks how she trapped him in the fourth wall. She tells him that when she went to grab the tank, she modded the front door into a portal to the fourth wall. Mozart was shocked. But while they were arguing, that mysterious, shadowy woman stared in through the window, and then she snuck in and listened to them. She then ducked out as Mandy snapped her restraints and easily escaped. Mandy posed as Mildred, reconstructed Mayor Tower, and warped to the top. She then found the plans for Mildred's robots and merged them to create the super robot capable of building even more robots. She then patted herself on the back and recited her favorite poem, The Mother of Death. Mozart can't let any of this slide, so he inches his way up the side of the building and fires the gun through the window. But Mandy has replaced the windows with plexiglass, causing the bullet to fire back and knock the gun out of Mozart's hand. Both Mozart and the gun fell into the ocean below. The gun was gone. Mozart's second plan to stop Mandy involved hiding an RPG behind his back and sneaking up the elevator. But the guards caught him and knocked him out, so Mozart decides to access the elevator from the basement floor, which he assumes Jane had a tunnel leading to. He runs to her house's wreckage and finds a tunnel. He enters the basement and runs into the elevator. The basement feels cold and creepy. Something is amiss. He shattered the security camera and shuffled up the elevator shaft, but Mandy cut the elevator cable, sending the elevator crashing down onto Mozart. He ran from the shaft and heard knocking in the basement walls. He ran back through the tunnel. Knowing he was completely out of options, he ransacked Antoinette's wreckage and found dozens of weapons. He stormed through the front doors, shot all of the guards at once, shuffled up the elevator shaft, and threw a stick of dynamite directly at his mother. But a mini robot jumped in front and grabbed it. She shuffled towards him and revealed her super robot was complete. It was constantly creating other miniature robots. She slaps him down the shaft and throws his lit dynamite down with him, but he sends it right back up. It explodes, but Mandy has already disappeared from the office with her robots. Meanwhile, in the 0th dimension, Antoinette and Jane are freaking out about the woman who is tormenting them. They are no longer hypnotized, and Jamison calls them idiots. They all light on fire from the torture. Mildred, however, feels something deep inside of her soul, and then she vanishes, much to the torturer's confused dismay. Refusing to give up, Mozart confronts his mother one last time. She sends the mini robots on him and they surround him completely. Mandy has her robot build her a super mansion, bigger than any that has existed prior. Construction finishes in mere hours, and Mildred's soul, having vanished, ascends through the dimensions and comes to possess the hub robot. Because it's like she said, these robot plans tether on to anyone in her bloodline. This causes 3 of the mini robots to be possessed by her father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. They all glow. Mandy's plan is coming to fruition. They must stop her immediately. But the mysterious woman still watches. So that was Season 6. It's mostly just people failing at trying to stop Mandy Shear, and Season 7 is probably the most insane, action-packed season by far, and it's pretty quick, so let's blast through it too. Mandy approaches her hub robot, and Mildred explains her plan, how she knew Mandy couldn't resist the robot's blueprints. Mandy laughs, says she knew Mildred would come back, and she inserts a hacking chip into the robot, causing Mildred's soul to be pinned down inside of it, the robot taking over. All of the robots taking over. Mandy tells them that she is not the one who started all of this. She then retreats to her office, and the mini robots use Antoinette's DNA to reopen the limbo portal. They grab a stick of dynamite, throw it through with Mozart, and blast him into deep limbo. Now nothing can stop Mandy from multiverse domination. The great Puffin Plight begins. She puts a wall up all over the city and covers it with her alchemic powers. The people rally around Mare Tower, and she cages them all swiftly. Then she blows up the tunnels beneath the city, causing it to separate from the ground. She puts an alchemic bubble around the whole city, and the remaining cavern floods with seawater. She also floods the bubble, and the caged people float inside. The army is called, the tanks appear, but anyone who gets close is sucked into the bubble and drowned. Mandy then warps the US president next to her and holds him ransom to the whole world. She tells the world to stand outside of her bubble if they ever want to see him again. Nobody listens to her demands, so she melts Antarctica, drops nuclear bombs across the continents, and finally, everyone shows up. She sucks them all into cages and expands her bubble. She then annihilates planet Earth and holds the bubble in her hand. She enters it and relaxes in her mansion. For now. We see the mysterious woman watching through the waves as Mandy goes over her 10-step plan for world domination and the ability to torture the world's population with ease. Then her torturing room is revealed. It's 10 times the size of Jane's and is the most devastating thing humanly possible. She splits everyone into dozens of cages as the mystery woman watches from afar. They all ask why she's doing this, and she says torture is fun. She says for ultimate power, she needs to become a 6th-dimensional being like David did that one time. Luckily, she already has her version of the 4th wall, so she blows it up, absorbs the power, and glows blue with the power of a higher dimension. She fills up all the cages with people and gets ready. She begins her torment. Massive lightning bolts. She electrocutes everybody in the cages. She loves the power a little too much. She fires a bolt a bit too hard, and it misses the cage. It ricochets off of her reflective chrome harpoon, and it hits Mildred the hub robot, instantaneously frying the hack chip. Mildred immediately tackles Mandy to the ground, and this robot is so powerful, it has the capability to pin her down. Mildred stops her. They all do. Mandy, in a last-ditch effort to save her skin, screams at Mildred's great-grandpa. She tells him that his family evicted Mandy's mom from her home for no reason. They were all framed, and none of the mayors know the truth. They exchange glances, but decide to throw her into deep limbo anyways. She now sits with Mozart in the first dimension. Mildred and her ancestors use their immensely powerful abilities to wipe the memories of the population, remerge the Earth together, put the city back into its place, and plop everybody back where they belong. All has returned to how it should be. Meanwhile, Mozart speaks with his mom. He tells her the saying, "We're all equal in limbo." But deep limbo's different. Mozart's been there longer. Mandy's still in shock, so Mozart absorbs her sixth dimensionality with supreme ease as she stares on in utter shock and dismay. He waits in limbo for Mildred. She tears open the portal one final time with Antoinette's DNA. They yank him through. Mildred is deteriorating without Mandy's alchemy, and Mozart screams, "I love you," just as she blows up, and they all fall back into the 0th dimension. The torturing woman is waiting. Mandy is furious. She talks to herself. She resorts to the only thing she can think of. She uses what little telepathy she has to communicate with her teacher, Poe. He's the only one now who can open the portal. He's been in East Asia for quite some time, but manipulating him is easy. She commands him to appear. He is a god-ranking alchemist. He can do it. And then Season 7 ends. From here on out, things get absolutely insane and amazing. Let's go into Season 8. She contacts him and he responds to her. He tells her that he wasn't swept up in her petty world domination. She laughs and tells him that she has hypnosis that can control him. And then she does. Meanwhile, Mozart goes to Mayor Tower and meets Mildred's family. Mildred's sister Beatrice and one of Mildred's other daughters, Veronica, now work with Mozart to run the city. But then Poe comes to town. Mozart watches him as he slides through the town. He approaches the beach cave and throws Mozart through the air. He uses his wand to open the portal with absolute ease as the mystery woman watches. He then enters limbo, rips open deep limbo, and Mandy flies out, snaps Poe to bits, and she obliterates his wand. Then we get a flashback to when Poe taught Mandy. She was a very little girl, very innocent and kind. For Lesson 1, she uses his wand. She shows potential. Then she makes a baseball move with her mind. Poe is so happy for her. Meanwhile, Mandy is chasing Mozart through the city back to her mansion. He hides in her torturing room and she finds him. She throws him onto an active chainsaw. Flashing back to Mandy, now years later, she is a young adult. Poe is congratulating her on becoming a professional alchemist. She is so happy and innocent and thankful. She wants to find her baseball, her monumental object, but it fell behind a stack of books many years ago. She climbs over and Poe screams no as she tilts her head up to find a hidden framed image of her mother on his wall. Poe gasps and says she wasn't supposed to see that. Meanwhile, Mozart is dying. He asks her why she's so evil. She says she can't tell him. So he grabs her, stares at her eyes, and looks into her soul. He uses tricks he picked up from her to stare with all of his power and crush her soul. She falls over, also now dying. She runs around erratically, freaking out, screaming, "What have you done? You have let her out!" Mozart is confused, but doesn't want to waste time. As he takes his last breath, he kicks her over top of the chainsaw and she flips off the edge, landing into a massive vat of acid. They both descend into the 0th dimension, with the evil woman waiting right there. Then suddenly, Mandy's charred body climbs out of the acid and walks out of the mansion. But meanwhile, in the flashback, Poe says, "Mandy, you're ready." She wants him to answer her question about her mom and why she's framed on his wall, but Poe says it's time. He then says he is going to put something into her soul. He needs her to contain it. He reaches from behind the painting and pulls out a giant glowing orb. He sticks it inside of her. Mandy suddenly snaps and becomes instantly evil, freaking out. He says he can teach her to contain it. Mandy runs from his house, now full of evil. He sighs to himself. He says how he needed someone to contain Suzanne's spirit. But luckily, he didn't make Mandy a god alchemist. Someone has to contain Suzanne's soul, Mandy's evil mother. That's why he trained her, to contain the spirit of the true villain. And now Mandy's soul was corrupted by her mother's, which was trapped deeper inside. He says he refused to kill Suzanne, so he had to hold her inside of someone. Poe feels ashamed. We then finally flash back to the future and watch as Mandy's burnt corpse fizzles and fades into the soul Mozart let out by crushing Mandy's. Suzanne, Mandy's mother. Season 8 ends. Let's dash into Season 9, January 1st, 1897. Suzanne McWince and Philip Shear get married and conceive a child, whom is born October 31st, later that year. They're both lovely people, and they have a lovely daughter, but on their daughter's 5th birthday, Suzanne and Philip head downstairs, as Suzanne accidentally kicks the rug, causing Philip to trip and fall onto his head, concussing him to death. Suzanne feels so upset, and then 5-year-old Mandy walks into the room. Mandy screams, and Suzanne has no idea what to say. In a state of panic, Suzanne lies to her daughter. The only people she feels willing to tarnish the name of are the people that evicted her from her home as a child. She blames it on the Mayer family. The young Mandy holds a massive grudge, but she refuses to let this terrible event corrupt her. Suzanne, on the other hand, the death of her husband and the lie she just told is bringing her back into the vengeance she held in her childhood. She begins to feel rage. Over the course of the following 5 years, it really builds on her. Now it's Mandy's 10th birthday and her mother has lost it. She's borderline murderous. Mandy barely defies her mom and Suzanne kills a random man. Mandy cries, and then Suzanne disowns her on her own birthday. Mandy runs away, and guess who shows up moments later? Poe. He screeches at Suzanne and tells her that he can't let the eviction of her childhood ruin her again. She stares him down intensely and tells him, "I'm your daughter. You wouldn't hurt me." He then tells her that he doesn't kill, so he decides to trap her. He says she cannot comprehend what happened when they were evicted, but he has no time to explain. So he destroys her body, turns her into his soul, and makes the decision to train and adopt Mandy to eventually hold Suzanne. You know, the obvious choice. Years later, we flash to Poe after Mandy left him. She was released into the world, her and her now evil ways. It's 38 years after that, and Mandy returns to Poe. Mandy still has no idea that Poe is even her grandfather. She tells him that Jeremiah had a daughter named Jane. She's angry that her 2 sons never became evil. She tells Poe that she punished her other son, Kyle, by virtually deconstructing his family's memories. Poe refuses to help her, but Mandy's desperate. She wants evil granddaughters, and to do that, she needs to become a god alchemist. Poe fears that her soul has become permanently tainted, and he refuses to help her. She sighs and says her last resort would be to create a physical object that would allow her to hypnotize people, but that would only be if she never became a god. Poe denies again. He says he was ready for her return. He then pulls out a gun he created known as the Professional Disabling Gun. Yes, Poe created it. He then says, "I don't kill. The reason is because torturing is better." Then he stutters and clears his throat. Anyways, then she stole his gun, decided to create the hypnotic amulet, and left. Flashing back to Suzanne in the present, she tries to get used to the new world. She's stunned to find that 130 years have passed. She finds Mandy's evil checklist, and she's pleased at what Mandy has become. She goes into the museum's library to read up on the past century, and she learns that the only people left in control of the city are the most pathetic ones in the whole Mayer family. Suzanne may not be an alchemist, like, at all, but she's swift, cunning, and she's going to destroy them for the pain they've caused over the past century. She approaches Veronica and tries to lie about her intentions. Veronica says she knows who Suzanne McWince is. She says that Suzanne is the most wanted criminal in the history of the city. That's why her framed image has always been hanging there on the wall of the office. She's the only villain they never caught because one day she just disappeared. Veronica tries to apprehend her, and Suzanne lashes out and jumps on her. Suzanne says she needs help to resurrect Mandy, so that they can reconcile. She's aware that Veronica knows nothing of alchemy, but Mildred did. She wishes to do a soul swap so that Mandy can come back in exchange for Suzanne. Suzanne threatens to murder Veronica's 3 sisters, but Veronica knows she's bluffing. So Suzanne fakes crying, explains her sad past, lies about her intentions again, and Veronica falls for it. They collect the ingredients: Martian dust and a cauldron. The person who crushes the dust into the cauldron will swap for the soul of their choice. Problem is, Mandy's soul was actually crushed apart by Mozart, so they need to use a bit of someone else's soul power to fix it. So they were ready. Suzanne smiled and threw the dust at Veronica, grabbed her hands and forced her to crush it in. Veronica screamed as she became Mandy. Meanwhile, look who's spying, the mysterious woman. Suzanne then put some of the remaining Martian dust on her chest, and doing that, shared her soul's power with Mandy, bringing her back to life. Mandy is instantly terrified. Mandy has still got a ton of evil residue on her soul, but Suzanne's now out of her. When Suzanne reveals that she's sorry and that she killed Philip, Mandy instantly feels power over her. Furious, Mandy shoots her mother to death with a pistol, and then she swaps Suzanne's soul for Jane. She sings her favorite poem as the zeroth dimension woman freaks out at her losses. Mandy and Jane then kidnap Veronica's 3 sisters and swap their souls for Jamison, Antoinette, and David, as Beatrice watches on in dismay. Mandy apologizes for hurting all of them, and they go off to storm Mayor Tower. But Jamison and Antoinette stay behind because Jamison has something to say. Jamison shakes of fear as he says to Antoinette that he saw his mother in the zeroth dimension. She was beating up the torturing woman. Her name was Ginger, and everyone is terrified of her. Charles, Jamison, literally everybody. And Jamison's sad that they left his father in there with her, but they decide to follow the group. Finally, Beatrice is panicked, so she swaps her soul for Mozart, leaving a note on how to bring everybody back. He knows it will corrupt him, but Mozart kills a ton of random people to resurrect all of his friends. Mildred appears with the gang, and she sees Mozart shaking on the ground with evil tendencies. She cages Mozart for his slow turn to villainy for that evil act. Then, the true villains appear, and Season 9 ends. Pretty crazy story, right? Keeping up? Good. Because we're on the last season I will explain today. Season 10 is a slaughter fest. Bill and Kyle are shocked to be in a future world, but they are soon accustomed. Everyone starts fighting. Bill refuses to hurt his granddaughters, but one attack from them and it sets him off. The Grand Puffin Massacre begins. Veronica pushes David out the window, killing him. The force of doing so caused her to trip and fall out the window behind her, killing her. Mandy launches Marina through the wall, killing her. Mozart busts open his cage and dives after Marina and trips, falling to his death in the process. Suddenly, everybody hears that same knocking in the tower's walls that Mozart heard in the basement, but they just ignore it. Mandy places C4s all over the tower and runs out. Antoinette and Jamison follow, but Beatrice tackles Jane from on the ceiling. Mildred, Kyle, and Bill all take parachutes and dive out the windows, while the explosion nukes Jane and Beatrice apart. Mare Tower violently explodes. All of the survivors land on a field, and Mandy shoots Kyle and Bill instantly. Antoinette burns the soul-swapping spell so nobody can return. Mandy is about to kill Mildred, and she says she plans to take over the world again. This time, she won't overuse her power like before. In a weird twist, Jamison then tackles Mandy, asking her how they can trust her after everything that's happened. If they can't bring back their friends now, then how can they all take over the world? Mandy loses it at Jamison. She tells him that she's still evil. She had no emotion before, but now she feels anger. She says she has a great hatred for Jamison's family, especially his mother, who apparently caused Mandy's family to be completely broken. Keeping her family together is what caused Mandy's insanity. Mandy tries to shoot Jamison, but Antoinette flips the gun on her at the last second, causing Mandy to shoot herself. Antoinette wants a second chance with Jamison since she's no longer evil. Then, Mildred stabs Jamison with a sword. Antoinette makes a speech and cries as Mildred takes her away and locks her in an asylum for her despicable crimes. 2 weeks have passed, and Antoinette fears for Jamison. His mother is there with him. Antoinette wants to get to the bottom of everything. She wants to figure out who framed Poe, she wants to figure out why the family was evicted, and she wants to figure out why Mandy keeps saying it isn't their fault. So Antoinette plans an escape. Meanwhile, Ginger finds the 0th dimension torturer and starts annihilating her. She says how she will utterly destroy her, calling her by her name, Ms. Finch. Antoinette uses her hairspray and hardens her hair, causing it to solidify. She snaps it off and reforms it into a pick so she can bust the lock. And she does, before dashing out of the asylum to Mandy's mansion. She needs to find out why Poe's family was evicted. Antoinette has figured out that Poe was Suzanne's dad, even though Mandy still has not. And the only thing Antoinette can do at this point is use a memory spell to look into her own past and see if any information is deep buried there. Mildred is alerted of Antoinette's escape, and she tries to bust down Mandy's door. Meanwhile, in the 0th dimension, Ginger fails at killing Miss Finch, so she decides to go after Charles. Jamison approaches to stop his mother, and she asks him if he went through with their plan. He says no, he didn't, so she threatens him. She says, "Don't make me do what I did to your brothers," and then she goes into her bigger form. She is a god alchemist, like Poe. She then threatens to obliterate Jamison's soul into the negative dimension, a place outside of ours where destroyed souls are sent. And Season 10 ends. I like to think of Seasons 1 through 5 as world building, Seasons 6 to 10 as action-packed, and Seasons 11 all the way to 18 as absolute lore building and twists and reveals and everything explained. So if you want, you can go watch that on my 3rd channel, just make sure to use the chronological playlist linked below. I think I went a bit fast in this video, so it's much easier just to use that playlist and watch them. There's also a wiki that I haven't updated in a while, but it explains a lot of information about them all. I've also got a couple of family trees I shared on my Twitter account. But if you want to know who framed Poe and why, or how powerful Ginger is, or who the Puffin is, or who created alchemy, or who the 2 mystery women are, then stay tuned. I may do a part 3. Currently I'm on season 18 or 19 of CP as I'm typing this, and there are a couple of other spin-off series on the channel which all relate to the main series. So until next time, I'm the Theorizer.